Welcome everyone to our last and final She Speaks with Dr. Melissa Murphy. We are so excited for y'all to be here. This has been a new series for the KSFL Institute, and this is the fifth out of 5. So we are really excited to finish strong. This has been a great collaboration with Launchpad to supplement the Entrepreneurial Mindset Bootcamp. So I'm so happy to see some EMB participants here. Thank y'all for being here so much. I think y'all finished last week, yeah? Is that right? Cool. Awesome. Well, we will just get started with a little brief updates and announcements from the KSFL Institute and Launchpad in case this is the first time joining one of our events. And then we will kick it over to our presenter, Dr. Melissa Murphy, to talk about persuasive communication. So I'm Leslie Robinson, director of the KSFL Institute, and we just have one big announcement for you since we are officially finished with the spring semester, but we have our female founder pitch competition. The date has been set, so save the date. It's October 20th, and we actually have an update on the amount of cash prizes. We are offering over $50,000 in cash prizes in one of these 5 categories that you see on your screen. Applications are due on May 31st, so you've got a little bit of time to hit submit on the application, check it out. But this is the first time that we're doing this, and we would love for y'all to be part of it. So that's the big announcement from our end. But just generally, the KSFL Institute is a partnership between 5 different colleges on campus: Macomb School of Business, College of Fine Arts, Undergraduate Studies, Cockrell School of Engineering, and the College of Natural Sciences. And we also just are so close to opening our physical location, which is the Kendra Scott Center in the College of Fine Arts, which is in the Doty Fine Arts building. So check us out in the fall because we hope to do this series in person safely. But yes, happy to have y'all. And if you want to get more engaged with the KSFL Institute, there's a couple different ways that you can do that. Join our listserv, follow us at KSFL Institute, join our Slack channel. It's pretty robust. And we also have a student council so you can get more involved in just the happenings of what we're doing. And with that, I'll pass it off to Nina to talk a little bit about the Launchpad.
Melissa, I can definitely do Slack training. I feel like we've already talked about this. So, all right, next slide, please. Thank you, Leslie. So, hi everyone. I think some of you know me. My name is Nina Ho. I'm director of the Launchpad. We're a program school of undergraduate studies with the mission of supporting students of all backgrounds and helping them to explore and experience entrepreneurship in a way that is inclusive and cross-disciplinary. We're also here to just help students cultivate an entrepreneur mindset. So whether or not you go on to launching a company, you're better prepared for the modern workforce. All right, next slide, please. So we provide a whole ecosystem of resources, and we cater that to where you are on your entrepreneur journey, whether you're early and you need inspiration and events and you don't necessarily have an idea yet, but you want to learn more and pick up skills. Whether you're mid-stage, meaning you have an idea, how can we help you use the idea as a tool for experiential learning? Or whether you're late stage and you have a venture with users and a revenue, how can we help you meet your next milestone? We offer a physical co-working space, resources, mentorship, our summer accelerator, which is about to kick off soon. And because we're part of this greater global Blackstone Launchpad Techstars network, we get exclusive funding and fellowship and travel opportunities for students on 40 acres. All right, next slide, please. So such a great way to connect with us is take a picture quickly of this QR code and sign up for a bi-weekly newsletter. It's where we aggregate all the events and opportunities that are going on campus and beyond, as well as from our partners. And so our last one for this semester will go out tomorrow, but there'll be lots of good stuff coming back in the fall when everyone is back safely in person. And also feel free to follow us on social as well. Next slide, please.
I think there are no more slides.
Okay.
Well, with that, I will stop sharing and let Dr. Murphy get her screen going. But so happy to have Dr. Murphy here with us. She is a professor in one of our KSFL Institute sponsored courses, which is the CPG Practicum. And also she is one of our first inaugural faculty fellows for the KSFL Institute. So thank you so much, Dr. Murphy, for being here. And I was gonna say the floor is yours, but how about the screen is yours? The Zoom is yours.
Thank you so much, Leslie and Nina, for hosting me. Thank you so much, Longhorns, for joining me. When I was your age, when I was younger, I took a public speaking class in college. And growing up, I was quite a bit of tomboy. I played all the sports underneath the sun, was involved in all of the clubs and all of the organizations, and was rather extroverted. So when I signed up to take this public speaking class, I thought it was going to be what's called a bird course. Anybody know what a bird course is? Any guesses? Feel free in the chat, or just unmute yourself. It looks like we've got, let's see, let me pull up my chat screen so I can see what y'all are saying. And then for some reason, I can't see anybody's names. Let's see. Nathan, you have your hand up.
I also put in the chat, you fly by like a bird.
Yes, you fly like a bird. So you fly right through it. And that's a reference to Sister Act 2, the movie, if anybody has seen that movie. So anyway, you fly right through it. So I was not concerned about this class at all. So sure enough, for the first presentation, I don't even remember what the topic was. That's how memorable it was. But I do remember that it did not go so well. So I stood up behind the podium, which was my first mistake. And I started speaking and very quickly realized, uh-oh, I'm not prepared as I thought I was. My heart rate started to pick up. My stomach started to toss a little bit, started to get really warm, and just my whole body tightened up, and realized that I was not prepared and should have practiced way more. And in fact, I had a friend, a really good friend, his name was Drew Sinclair, and he was really trying to root me on during this presentation. However, he was trying to get my attention in the back of the room. And in the back of the room, I'm like, hey, Drew, this is not a good time to send me a message. But he was waving his arms around, and then he grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. And sure enough, he was writing a message down to me. And this is what that message said. Can y'all see this? What does that word say? So in the moment, he's trying to give me feedback that I'm saying the word over and over and over again in my presentation, which of course, was that helpful at the time? Absolutely not. Made me that much more nervous. And so I was somewhat mortified. So the presentation was over, sat back down in my chair, was really disappointed in myself. I think I got a C on that presentation. So the next time that I came back, I was like, I'm going to take this serious. I'm going to turn up the heat. So I decided to give a presentation on the benefits of exercise, which of course I had a lot of experience with. Wanted to talk about exercise. So y'all, I was really serious about it. I had shorts and I had leggings on underneath my shorts, so you knew I was serious. I had a sweatband on, and I did what was called an attention getter to start that presentation. I made that audience do 5 jumping jacks to start the presentation. And guess what? I'm going to make you do 5 jumping jacks with me right now. So, Emmanuel, I'm looking at you since you're in my 8 a.m. You are going to count us out on these 5 jumping jacks. And in fact, I wore shorts just for the occasion. So, Emmanuel, stand on up. Everybody unmute themselves, get warmed up, and we're going to do 5 jumping jacks together.
All right. Feel free to turn your video on. Dr. Murphy, can we get some like gratuitous stretching in before we? I don't want to. Sure. Okay.
Especially for those of you who've been sitting all day, so just stretch it out, and feel free, Emmanuel. Count us out. We're just gonna do 5. Whew. Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Woo! Woo! That feels good, right? So sure enough, got the blood flowing for all of those peers of mine in the classroom. And of course, many of them looked around thinking, this lady is crazy. I'm too cool for school. And I'm not going to do this. So got some laughs in, but guess what? I got their attention, and it was unique, and it was something different than anybody and everybody else was doing. So, I just wanted to, we can go full screen here. Now y'all can see these slides a little bit better. So I ended up getting an A on that presentation. And years later, y'all, here I am at the University of Texas, utilizing what I learned in that classroom to teach others how to be persuasive speakers. So I've been here at UT since 2010, talking about what you're going to see in this presentation today. My teaching style is incredibly interactive. My philosophy is if you're not laughing, you're not learning. And number two is I like to talk with you rather than at you. So feel free to stop me at any point. But one of the reasons why I'll forever have a job here at the University of Texas and in my consulting work is that the number one fear in the United States is public speaking. Speaking in front of other people. Any guesses as to what the number 2 or number 3 fear is? Feel free to pop them into the chat here. What are those other fears? Snakes and spiders. Those are my top fears. And Leda got it. Death is the one. So check this out, y'all. Some people are more afraid to speak in public than they are of dying. So this is an intense fear that people experience. Couple that finding with the fact that your ability to speak persuasively, concisely, and with memorable results is your number one predictor of success at work. In fact, your ability to do this contributes to your bottom line. In other words, you are going to make more money, get promoted faster if you can hone this skill. And while we call this a soft skill, there's nothing soft about it because they're actually pretty hard, but they are teachable. It is a learned skill that you get better with practice. You are not born a good communicator. You can be made a communicator. So we also know from the research, year after year, recruiters come to us here at the University of Texas and they say, hey, we're looking for to add some Longhorns to our new recruiting class. And guess what? Here's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who can communicate. They have really excellent communication skills, both oral and written. That is second to, I think teamwork is number 2. Number 3 is your analytical skills. So before your ability to do modeling in Excel and understand big data and really even work in teams, the number one most desired skill is for you to be able to communicate more clearly. So y'all, it's good to see you. Thank you so much, Nina, for introducing me. We're going to get into it. So we're going to talk about the problem with presentation. So we're going to have an activity to start, and then we're going to break down verbal and nonverbal delivery, because one of the biggest pieces here is you're using your instrument to its fullest potential. And then we're going to talk about just how we plan presentations in general. We're going to have a different mindset. So when we talk about entrepreneurship as a mindset, as Blackstone does in their first stage, we're going to talk about it more as it relates to communicating about your venture or your idea at work with a different mindset. So what is your presentation pain? So I'm going to ask you now, and in fact, I'm going to go out of full screen mode so I can write down your thoughts here. How many of you have seen a bad presentation? Can you raise your hand in the chat? Seen bad presentations? Yeah, we've all seen them. So I want you to unmute yourself and you tell me what was bad about those presentations that you've seen, from the speaker perspective, from the slides, delivery. What are your pet peeves when it comes to presentation skills? Let's write them up.
I think one for me would be too much information.
Too much information. Overload. Yep. What else? We're going to fill up this whole screen. And since we're going to do this really quickly, just shout it out. Unmute yourself here.
Not enough pictures, kind of like what Nina said.
Okay. No visuals. All bullets. Boring. What else?
Their tone is like dry or like the same across.
Yeah, monotone, I agree.
Yeah. So that's what we call monotone. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that. What else? Bad presentation skills.
Maybe their posture, like they don't like move around and just stay in one place, and they. I don't know.
Distracting filler words, the ums and the likes.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that.
Sorry.
When they read off of the slides.
Yes, when they read off the slides. Hello, Melissa. Good to see you.
Hi.
Leslie, we're trying to recruit Melissa to be our TA for the CPG class.
I think you should totally be the TA for the CPG class.
Okay, y'all, let's fill it up. What else?
No branding.
No branding. Mm-hmm. Also known as ugly slides. What
It's
else?
also because there's like a lack of a story.
Uh-huh.
And first, if you don't like have a story, it's like the most engaging thing you can have. Like you hook the audience.
Yeah, so data dumping, as Nina points out here, it's just like staring at an Excel spreadsheet on a PowerPoint slide. That's not very helpful. I got jargon for Nina. What else? Bad presentation skills.
When they're uncomfortable or unconfident.
Yeah. How do you know, like, Emmanuel, when you say that, what's the sign that they're uncomfortable or unconfident?
Nathan touched on earlier, so posture, their tone, their eye contact as well.
Okay, so eye contact. We've got tone, we've got posture, but for eye contact, I got Nina's apologizing before you even begin. So sorry, I'm not feeling well. So sorry. These aren't my slides. Like apologizing for somebody else's work. Comment. So sorry, we're starting late. So sorry. I haven't practiced yet. What else? Let's try to get
When they're
through.
speaking too fast or you can't hear them.
And adding on to that, not ending on a down note when they make a statement.
So in other words, up talk
Yeah, sounds like you're asking a question all the time, like
all the
this.
time, and I'm not really sure what y'all think. Here's
Has
our
this
first
thing ended?
Here's my first recommendation. Okay, good. That's good.
Oh, lack of engaging with the audience.
Yeah. Not knowing your audience. Not speaking to their level. For sure. Okay. Anything else about visuals or delivery or?
I will say not driving well. So if it's a team presentation, they haven't practiced enough to understand when to come in, or they'll repeat redundant information.
Mhm. Absolutely. So this is a good list. So let's just look at another list from other presentations here. So shifty, nervous, no confidence, fidgety, pacing, swears, facing away, looking at the ground, looking at the slides, no big picture, not streamlined, long paragraphs, going over time. Very rarely do people go under time, but there's a lack of structure, a lack of organization. Y'all seen a presentation that just kind of rambles and tangents, and you're like, where are we going? I'm so confused. I'm incredibly lost. Not serious or not professional. Apologizing, speech voice, bad slide formatting. Here's some others. Not enjoying themselves, chewing gum. Y'all, I've even seen people smoke a Juul in the middle of a presentation. That was pretty bad. No stories, all this stuff. Okay, so let me ask you now, how many of you are guilty of one or a couple of these things? Be honest. Let me know in the chat. Raise your hand. A couple of different ways for you to participate. Okay, so everybody's raised their hand. Now, if you know they're bad, why are you doing them? if you know that these are bad and you don't like when other people do them, let's have a discussion. Then why do you think that you do them? Nathan?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. The reason why I do that is I was diagnosed with two neurological disorders as a child. The first one being autism spectrum disorder, and the second being attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And those are neurological disorders that inhibit with my communication skills. Like, it's very difficult for me to maintain eye contact with people for very long. It makes me very anxious when being put in public settings, and it makes me like super fidgety, especially in like public spaces. So that's probably those are like the biggest factors for me.
Okay. Yep. And so what we hear there is a little bit of things that you can control and things that you can't control, especially when it comes to nerves. So that's one explanation for some of this. But what about, like, I don't know, having a lack of a story, or it being dry, or all bullet points? Can you control that? Yeah, you can, can't you? So thank you for sharing, Nate. Anybody else? Why would you be making these presentation faux pas?
Sometimes I don't know. So for example, with the ending on a like high note, like I used to have a really bad habit of basically asking a question every sentence, but someone pointed out. So that's one.
Yeah, bad feedback. So you're not getting that feedback, just not hearing it. So we'll come back to this idea. Any other explanations you think here? I'll throw out a couple. Anybody else? So common explanations are the culture of presentations at your workplace or in your classroom is very, very low or very poor. So the CEO has bad presentations, or your director, your manager is really bad at presentations. They don't prepare in advance. So for you, you're like, why do I need to prepare better? When the culture of the presentations, our expectations are so low that you don't really need to clear them. The other thing is just lack of preparation. So when you talk about data dumping or not having visuals, it's all bullets, or not driving well, not coordinating, this just comes down to a lack of preparation and a lack of practice. Two of things which you can control. But so follow-up question, last question here on this activity is, how many of you have done one or a couple of these things? And several of you are saying, yes, 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 I have. And then somebody comes up to you after the presentation, Emmanuel, and says, hey, you did a really great job. Nice job with your presentation. Have you gotten that feedback? So you got no feedback, but then you've got maybe some positive feedback as a result of committing these faux pas. What's the problem with that? What's the challenge with that?
If you don't mind me interjecting here, do you think maybe it has something to do with a negative reinforcement? Like, people are feeling bad for us because they feel like we bombed and they're trying to make us feel better about it? Do you think that could be it?
Very sophisticated answer, sophisticated take here. Probably. There's a little bit of that, right? And so despite them trying to be nice or try to do us a favor by not hurting our feelings, we don't improve as speakers. And so all of a sudden we get that we're reinforcing bad habits as a result of people giving us good feedback for making mistakes. So that's also part of the culture, right? Of people not wanting to give you that direct feedback. So feedback is not good or bad as long as it's helpful and it's constructive. So it's important to think about ways that we can improve on these things by being honest with another. Comes down to preparation and practice. So I'll go back to our full view here. So 86% of executives surveyed believe that strong communication impacts their success. However, despite the fact that they make more money, what we know to be true is that only 25% of even high-powered executives practice for more than 2 hours for high-stakes presentation. Now, they might have earned this right over many, many years, 30 years of speaking in front of people, so they can wing it a little bit more. But what the experts will tell us is that if we're applying for that pitch competition in October, where we might have a slide deck, probably not of 30 slides, but maybe 15, okay? Essentially what they say is you want an hour of preparation for each slide that you're going to present. 1 full hour. So we do not prepare this amount for a presentation that's 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But the important thing is, because we are all strapped for time, we still want to go through these 4 stages. We want to analyze the audience. We want to generate ideas and research. We want to storyboard. And then we might go back to the drawing board. And then we're going to go to design, visuals, and revise. And so this is an iterative process, just like those design thinking workshops you might have attended this last year if you're interested in entrepreneurship. We talk about this as being an iterative process. You fail fast, and then you redo it. So these pitch decks, especially as an entrepreneur, they go through evolution, many, many stages. So how long do you prepare? You want to ask yourself that. In fact, I was with Melissa, I guess last week, preparing for a presentation, giving her feedback, and they went back to the drawing board because they have what's called knowledge bias. They've been living and breathing their brand and thinking about their ideas nonstop. And so they think they're being very clear in communication, also known as the illusion of transparency. But in reality, they've got to communicate it to somebody else to get that feedback. So when it comes to being a persuasive speaker, y'all, if we were to envision this model here, this framework as a stool with 3 legs, in order for us to be the best we can be and change the world, we need all 3 of these legs to be really strong. So we have to have a really strong delivery style. So that's timed in body language, verbal, nonverbal, how likable we are, what's our volume like, as well as a really compelling story that we're telling. And a lot of this is built around organizational tools and rhetorical tools. So how do we start the presentation? How do we end the presentation? There's a reason why I have you do those jumping jacks with me at the beginning of the presentation to grab your attention. And then we're going to talk about data and emotion and the balance there. And the last one being slides. And as Melissa pointed out, branding is really important. There's a reason why Kendra Scott Well Institute has beautiful slides, because they're really committed to their brand and communicating that brand value through all of their assets and their branding. So Pierre, my fluffy TA is weighing in here. Okay, so we're going to talk about delivery first. Hang on just 1 second, y'all. Give me one. All right, so let's talk about delivery. One of the important things. So let's talk about this. It's not what you say, but how you say it. So if you could flip your camera on, if you're in a position to flip your camera on, I want to try a little activity with you real quick. So I want you to just listen to what I say and do as I do. Okay, I want you to put your hand on your cheek. Put your hand on your cheek. I have busted most of you, including Leslie and Nate. I said, put your hand on your cheek, and your hand is on your chin right now. Busted. Okay, so it's not what you say, but how you say it. So when this comes down to it, it's not that one is more important than the other, but nonverbal communication, researchers will say, is 85% of the message. 85%. So you can have the most perfect talk track and you've memorized your presentation, which is a really, really bad strategy. But it matters how you deliver that message to the crowd. That's really going to make an impact. So how quickly do you think people form a first impression of a speaker? Any guesses here in the chat? Oh, oops, accidentally hit the next. So it is 7 seconds. It's very, very quick. So in 7 seconds, what do people do? They size up your credibility, your confidence, your likability, your trustworthiness, how much they like you, how much you think they care for you, your attractiveness. All of this happens in a really short amount of time. So before we even speak on stage, before we even open our mouth on Zoom, people are making impressions. Now, they, just like computers have software updates, they can update their impression of you. But those first few seconds of a presentation or a meeting or a networking event or an interview are so, so very important. So when it comes down to it, let's practice. I don't know if, Nina, you have annotations set up for this Zoom. I don't think so, but that's okay. So if I were to ask, first impressions here, which quadrant do you want to be in? And you can just vote by going up to the quadrant in your screen. You want lower left, upper right? Which one do we want to be in? Upper left, right? Sometimes we want to be in the warm and incompetent quadrant, which is our Michael Scott quadrant, right? Would you rather be feared or loved? So you want to be warmth and confident. So the idea is when we meet somebody for the first time, we ask ourselves two questions. Do I like them? And are they good at their job? Do I trust them? And how do we make these impressions? Like, how do we calculate that first impression? It all comes down to nonverbals. So nonverbal vacation, we could have an entire semester on this topic. In fact, there is a class that exists. It's called Nonverbal Communication in the Moody College of Communication. It's a fantastic class. And we talked 15 weeks about this. So I'm going to talk just about the highlights. And so you all pointed this out in our list of what not to do. And that eye contact is really important. So if we talk about from the tops of our head to the bottom of our toes, eye contact is really important. And you want to make meaningful eye contact. You don't want to be looking down at your feet. You don't want to be turned around at your slides. You don't want to be looking at an external monitor. You want to be making that formal eye contact. And the idea here is 2 to 3 seconds with as many people in the room as possible. And that is important because we want to have many conversations with as many people in the room as possible. So if you've ever been to a networking event where people are scanning the room and they're kind of looking over your shoulder, doesn't make you feel so good. You're like, I guess they're looking for the next best thing. So instead, you want to have individual interactions with as many people in the room as possible. So that's done through eye contact. Another trick here is that it actually helps you lower your filler words. So one trick is it goes one thought to one person, silently move on to the next pair of eyes, and then silently move on to the next pair of eyes. Slows you down initially, but it'll really help with those filler words. Next up is gestures. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. Gestures are incredibly impactful. They've done a lot more research in recent years on the positive impact of gestures when speaking. So a lot of times we can talk about what not to do versus what to do when it comes to gestures. And on Zoom, it's a little bit different, but one of the most important things is you want to show your hands. So when we look at speakers for the first time, when we're meeting somebody for the first time, I'll ask people, what do you look at first? Some people will say, oh, look at their eyes, or I'll look at their nice smile. Or in the state of Texas, we might say, well, we're looking at their boots. What kind of boots are they wearing, or the watch they're wearing? In reality, we're looking at their hands. Because if we were to come face to face with them in medieval times, think about Game of Thrones, we're looking at their hands to see if they have a rock or a spear. Are they my friend or are they my foe? So showing the hands are really important in building trust. So when it comes to gesturing, we can talk about things, what not to do. You don't want to do the shake weight. You don't want to have your hands in front of your mouth, and you don't want your hands in your pocket. So I'm going to give you 5 ideas for how to use your hands. And the first one is just that. When you're talking about different numbers in the presentation, use your digits. So 3 important points that we want to make, or 2 big recommendations for you, or 3 markets that we're considering for this product. So use your numbers. You can talk about increase, decrease. I caught a fish this big. Or we found a really teeny tiny number in our data set, but it's really impactful. Or the stock continues to rise or fall. So that's number 2. Number 3, when something's really important to you, gesture to your chest like this, gesture to your heart. Like, this is really important to me, and I'm going to tell you something really personal. So that's a simple one as well. Number 4, the divider. So when we're talking about Texas A&M and we're talking about the University of Texas, we're going to gesture from one side to the next. When we're talking about the Democrats believe this and the Republicans believe this, and they're going to rarely come together on this issue, the divider is really helpful. That's exactly right, Nina. We'll talk a little bit of why about those are impactful. So the divider is really helpful. And then the 5th and final one, this is a level up. If you can level up, y'all, this is what's called a referent gesture. And essentially, in many ways, it replaces speech. So if I were to go like this, I don't need to say anything. Y'all know what's up. Just to be quiet, shh, right? Or if I go like this, peace sign, or if I go like this means call me, or typing an email, or texting, or looking for my keys, or spooky spiders, this kind of thing. So that makes for really interesting, engaging experiences. And lastly, body, really important. So I want you to check your body language right now. Could you be sitting a little bit taller? Could your shoulders be back a little bit more and your ears over your shoulders, over your hips? It's really hard because we're sitting all day. Can we engage that core a little bit more? And all of this goes into your body position and your head position as well. Because if I were to give the presentation like this, I'm collapsing my vocal cords. So we want that boost in our confidence just to sit a little bit taller. And that's really good for confidence. So when it comes to these gestures and some of this research that I referred to earlier, you think there's a correlation between the number of gestures in a TED Talk and the number of views the talk receives? Nate's going, yes, 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 absolutely. In other words, talks will go more viral if they use more gestures. So what they found is twice as many gestures in a viral TED Talk as a non-viral TED Talk. Think about that. Twice as many. They counted on average 465 gestures in those viral TED Talks. How about this one? When we talk about nonverbal communication, we've talked about eye contact, we've talked about gestures or body, but our face is really important as well. How expressive we are with our eyebrows even, and our cheekbones. You think smiling has an impact on your perceived intelligence or how memorable you are? Y'all are smart, you're catching on, absolutely. So the latest research, back in the 90s, even in the early 2000s, there was mixed research on whether leaders smile more or less than their employees. You heard a little bit of both in the literature, but more recently it's yes, they are smiling. And so think about it, when you meet somebody for the first time, or you go on a first date, or you're in a networking event and you're meeting a friend on campus for the first time, okay, that smile is that warmth and that confidence that we're really searching for, and that comfort that makes us feel like we can trust somebody. So think about ways that you can really monitor this. We walk around all day not really thinking about our nonverbal communication. It's so automatic, so unconscious. So when you speak at your next event, in your next meeting, in your next classroom, think about ways that you can be more engaging with your expressions on your face and certainly smiling. So next up, we've covered verbal or nonverbal communication. Now we're going to cover verbal communication. This right here comes down to this instrument, especially as we're presenting in Zoom. In virtual environments, this is most important. So the three C's of verbal communication here: conviction, confidence, and conversation. So this is going to contribute to your overall impression of being a confident speaker, of being one that's really likable. You want to avoid memorization at all costs. So one of the things that I want you to take away from this talk today, if you remember anything else, is I want you to remember to get loud. Come early, get loud, stay late. As a Longhorn, this is so important. So I'm going to give you a quick little anatomy lesson on how your ear works. So your ear, I want you to touch your ear right now. Okay, touch your ear. It's really close to your mouth. Touch your mouth. Think about how close this is. So to you, you think that you're being really loud. But to the people on the other side of the phone, or the other side of the Zoom meeting, or the other side of the auditorium, they're not hearing you as much. So your ear is trained to pick up on what's called discriminant sounds for survival skills. This is why ambulances, they have those piercing sirens. It allows you to say, hey, this is important, I need to pay attention to it. However, right now in our spaces at home, we've got this constant sound going on in the background. Right now, it's my yard guy cutting the grass, which is what's gotten Pierre riled up. But it's drowned out in the background. I don't even notice it right now. Or there's a fan or an air conditioning unit in your room that just has this like constant sound in the background. Well, your ear is trained to drown that out because it's a constant sound. So let's think about that in terms of listening to speakers. When they have that monotone voice and it doesn't change and it's really soft and there's no vocal variety, your ear is trained to drown that out. So while we say monotone just makes us a little bit sleepy, it also, y'all, we are drowning that voice out. We're not even paying attention. So what you want to do is you want to get louder. And by you getting louder, you will get more animated with your voice. So if we think on a scale of 0 to 10, I want you always to be north of medium. I want you at a 6, 6.5 when you're speaking. And you might come down to a 4 when you're talking about something serious. And then you might jump up to a 7 when you're talking about a really big number that you want to emphasize. But you want to go back and forth and create that pattern for interest. That conversational tone is really important too. So you never want to memorize. You never want to memorize in presentations because you get that robot speech voice. So practice the presentation, having a coffee, walking outside, sitting with a friend at a picnic, rehearsing it that way. Oftentimes, I get questions about team body language. So I'm glad that, Nina, you brought this up earlier about coordination. So when we get back in the classroom or back in the boardroom, we want to think about our position. So like Beyonce sings about formations, we want to have a formation as well. We have formations on the football field. We need to have formations in plays when we have presentations with our co-founders and our employees. So think about the speaker being front and center and how you're going to transition in and out of those presentations. Many times, y'all, it'll be another sports analogy for you. I ran track growing up. And so I used to run the 4x4 meter relay, and we would pass the baton from one runner to the next. It's very predictable. And often presentations, the reason that they're boring is because they're predictable. So speaker 1 will present. They'll go off stage. Speaker 2 will present. They'll go off stage. Speaker 3, and they just hand off the baton. The more you interact, so for example, if Emmanuel and I are giving a presentation in the first 3 slides, we're going to go back and forth on those first 3 slides. And Melissa and I are going to share slides 4 and 5. And we're going to transition a bunch of times in between. We're going to look like a team that have practiced our plays. So that's really important. So I like to do what's called a little bit of edutainment when I do my workshops. So y'all, we're going to watch this speaker right now. We've learned about first impressions. We've learned about verbal delivery and nonverbal delivery. We talked about gestures and some of our pet peeves. I want you to identify in the chat some things that this speaker does well and something this speaker has to improve. So we'll watch just about 2 minutes of this clip.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Starr County Republican Party Executive Committee, good evening. And thank you not only for your attendance, but for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Phil Davison, and I am seeking our party's nomination for the position of Starr County Treasurer on November 10th, November of 2010, excuse me. In terms of my background, I am from the village of Minerva, where I'm serving my 13th year of elected service as a Minerva Council member. In terms of education, I have a bachelor's degree in sociology, a bachelor's degree in history, a master's degree in public administration, and a master's degree in communication. In terms of elections across Starr County, I have represented our party twice on the county ballot in both the primary and the general elections. When I ran for Starr County Clerk of Courts in 1996 and Starr County Commissioner in 2000, and I will not apologize for my tone tonight. I have been a Republican in times good, and I have been a Republican in times bad. Albert Einstein issued one of my most favorite quotes in the history of the spoken word, and it is as follows: in the middle of opportunity, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. I'm going to repeat that So I have clarity tonight. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for.
All right. So that is County Treasury Phil Davidson, who was made popular or went viral on the MTV show Tosh.0. Some of you are too young to know what that is. Maybe some of you know what that is, but this was before TikToks and short form videos went viral. So super aggressive. Obviously, this is a humorous example of someone who is creating a very awkward and intense first impression. Got some of the techniques in, but when we think about nonverbal communication, misses the mark on a lot of things. Very angry, the tone is off, but you know, some gesturing here. Yeah, absolutely a throwback to Tosh.0. Okay, so dear Longhorns, if there's one thing that you remember from today's workshop is never memorize. This is one of Phil's biggest faults. And you pointed this out here. He's pacing back and forth, coming back to the lectern, coming back, checking his notes, literally has to look down to see what position he's running for, and messes up those quotes and makes all of these mistakes because he is relying so much on those notes. You have to learn to speak from the heart, to be a persuasive communicator, to be trustworthy, and that involves a lot of practice. So next up, y'all, we're going to talk about content. And this is one of my favorite areas because my research and dissertation, when I was a PhD student, I studied all about storytelling. So when it comes down to the story that you're going to tell in a presentation or a pitch, or even in an interview, you've got to find the perfect mix of data and story. So you got to think about what scenario that you're communicating in. Is it a keynote address? Like, we're in graduation season. My favorite season of the year, besides award season, is graduation. So there's a lot of stories that are involved. And most of you in the creative fields are going to be pitching, especially if you're interested in entrepreneurship moving forward. And if you're going to be in a leadership position someday, you've got to have the ability to be experiential, to be persuasive and evocative by telling stories. So y'all remember Aristotle, that he was the original, he was what we call the founder of persuasion these days, or the father of persuasion. And this was his framework for being persuasive. You have to have an appeal to ethos, pathos, and logos. Logos being an appeal to logic, numbers and dollars and datas and cents and charts and graphs and citations. Pathos being that appeal to stories and empathy, P for empathy, testimonies, anecdotes, interview data, all the qualitative stuff. And then ethos is an appeal to your expertise, your credibility, your trustworthiness. So which one of these is most important when speaking? It's a trick question because it really depends. And truth be told, you need to have all of these appeals as much as possible to be persuasive. So what you're looking at here on the left-hand side, this is essentially what we call Monroe's motivated sequence. Every presentation that aims to be persuasive needs to follow this type of organizational pattern. So I've got 2 or 3 current students on the call right now, and they started with the problem that they're out to solve, the pain in the market, and then they introduce their solution through their product or service, and then describing the benefits and the costs for not adopting that course of action. So there are a number of persuasive structures that you can have before and after what was and what could be. But stories in general, one of the things that I'll encourage you to do in your life moving forward is to practice telling stories. Here are a dozen ways that stories are impactful for audiences. Y'all probably have different perspectives on each one of these. But when you think about, if you're in sales or if you're in marketing, I'm curious, Nina, which one of these is most important to you in your job? Or Leslie, in your job? Melissa, in your job as a CPG person, which one of these benefits is most important to you? Think about that. Emmanuel, in engineering, and thinking about ways that you can take advantage of all these amazing parts of storytelling. Stories inspire, absolutely, when you're building a brand. So I want to share some interesting research for you. If you don't believe me yet, this was some research done in a behavioral psychology class at Stanford, and the students were asked to give a 1-minute speech about crime. They could do this however they wanted. They shared statistics, 2.5 statistics on average, while only 1 in 10 students shared a story. 1 week later, how much do you think their peers recalled? What do they remember about those speeches? In fact, not much on the statistics. Think about that. So when we share statistics in our presentations and we data dump, a week later, y'all, you're not going to be that memorable. But when you tell stories, there's a 63% recall. This is a really compelling data point that supports how we can tell stories more. So other research finds that stories are recalled significantly more than facts, in fact, up to 22 times more. So when we think about audience attention spans, this is going to be some other important research here. Y'all, it's really hard to pay attention these days. The original TED Talk was based on attention span research that said that an average US adult can pay attention for 18 minutes at a time, 18 minutes. And that our attention span is highest at the beginning and at the end of a presentation. But guess what? It drops off in the middle during a traditional lecture. So that length of the presentation, it's so hard to keep up to pace with what's going on. So what do we do to combat this? We do what's called the change up approach. So we're going to change it up. So essentially we're going to shorten that attention span and we're going to repeat it as many times as we can. So we draw the audience back in and we can be compelling and persuasive and memorable throughout the presentation. How do we do this? Imagine this is your persuasive presentation toolkit and all of these different tools, just drop them into the toolkit. And you're going to use these throughout different parts of your career, different parts of your presentation. You might not use all of them at once, but humor is a really powerful one. One of my favorites as of late, the levity effect brings people together. So the way we start presentations and the way we end presentations is really important. Also known as the primacy and recency effect. People are really slow to keep up with new information. So we've got to take advantage of telling them the most important message up front and the most important message at the end, so they remember what we say. So here's some different ways that we can start those presentations. It is far too common for people to say, "Good afternoon, my name is, and today I'm going to give you a presentation about." Good afternoon, thank you for coming. Everyone does this. So think about your favorite artist. How do they start their concerts? They don't start by saying, "Hi, my name is Kanye West, and I'm going to perform some songs tonight from a variation of 3 or 4 of my albums." No, he comes out on a floating stage with pyrotechnics and all these crazy things. So you want to do something different. You want to do what's called a star moment. A star moment, something they will always remember. The power of 3 is a really important tool. And essentially, this is the idea that people remember things in terms of 3. So when it comes to the 3 C's of communication, what were they? Confidence, conversational, right? And speaking with conviction. The last tool that I'll throw out here as we start to wrap up our time together, this flies by, is using data. Data has a really important position in our presentations, especially here at the University of Texas. If you look at these statistics, Nina, if you were to get these survey results back from some data at Blackstone, you would be like, "Oh boy, we've got some people and productivity issues going on." But what would make this even more persuasive and meaningful and impactful, if we threw a soccer metaphor over the top of these data, all of a sudden we add a little bit of humor, a little bit of sarcasm here, and we point out the fact that all but 2 of our players in our organization would be competing against our own team members rather than the opponent. So we want to find creativity in our presentations. So here's some more examples, and some of the greatest entrepreneurs, greatest entrepreneurial minds, the way that they have an entrepreneurial mindset, they have a presentation mindset. And by the way, Steve Jobs had to train himself to be a better presenter. So here's some examples how you move from data to meaning in presentations. This is a really funny one. This is kind of combining a couple tools. This was an example. BuzzFeed is my guilty pleasure. They have really goofy quizzes and compilations. And here they came out with an article that here are 25 movies that have a better tomato meter rating than President Donald Trump. And so the idea is you get a good laugh out of this. And then you sit back and think, why do we have a threshold for our presidents being so low? Which, by the way, President Obama and President Clinton also had low approval ratings. So that's not what this is about. But think about how you can use data in creative ways. Things like alliteration and rhyming. We see it in the best brands. In their taglines, Pringles, once you pop, you can't stop. Oh, thank heaven for 7-Eleven. Bounty, the quicker picker upper. So you want to think of ways that you can add this branding into presentations. And lastly, organizational skills. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and you tell them what you told them. So today we started with a discussion about what bad presentation skills look and feel and sound like. We talked about the importance of delivery and verbal and nonverbal communication. And we talked a little bit about content. So we're going to end tonight with just a couple of questions, see what questions that you do have about persuasive presentations. Maybe in a future SHEspeaks piece, we'll get to cover a little bit more on storytelling and persuasive structures as well as visuals. But I'm going to turn it over to you all to see what questions that you have before we essentially wrap up. I have a couple of minutes. I know we started a couple of minutes late, but I'll throw up our sticky presentation formula.
Just have a quick question to start off with.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've already noticed this with all of your research, but have you noticed that people have much more effective communication skills when they talk about something that they're passionate about? Like they engage more gestures, they have more variation in their voice, and they get really excited. Like, have you noticed that?
Well, that's a really good question. I feel like you could do a dissertation on this and study this for about 10 years. We see entrepreneurs all the time come through Blackstone, the Kinder Scott Well Institute. My students did their presentations this week, and they were passionate about their projects, but nerves can get in the way of that. So the way that we're wired, right, for fight or flight, when we're nervous and we experience a threat, right, we think that we're going to be eaten for lunch, lion, tigers, bears, oh my, it's very difficult for us to communicate passion for other people. However, I can talk about this topic all day long, and it's so easy for me. I'm not nervous talking about this topic because I fall into that camp of 10,000 hours on this topic, But as a really good example, as an artist, for our creatives here, John Lennon, as an example, threw up before every live performance, and not very many people know that. So some people are just more hardwired to be nervous and have that heightened nervous system. So it's a mix. But I'll tell you, it's really hard to have good delivery when you just don't care. When you're not passionate about something, then you're really in trouble. Yeah, Leslie says, totally depends on the topic for my nerves. It's something you live, breathe, enjoy. It's easy. If it's something new, so Melissa here is an MBA school. A lot of MBAs will report to me. I work with them as a consultant from time to time. Like, this is so weird. I have never been nervous in presentations in my previous job, my previous role, but all of a sudden I am freaking out in front of my peers in MBA school. And often it's because they're presenting in front of their peers. And so there's research that you get most nervous in front of your peers versus your bosses or your interns, or your grandmother and your little niece or nephew, right? Like, it's our peers that make us most nervous. So sometimes, Leslie, I don't know if that's your experience as well, as the topic and then who you're speaking to, it could depend. But yeah, for different reasons, we get nervous.
Kind of interesting.
A whole nother topic that we could do a workshop on.
Okay, that's cool. It's really interesting how you say that, even though despite some people may have some passions, that nerves can get in the way of that. Like, I thought like people could use what they're passionate about to kind of like improve their communication. I mean, that's just personally what it's worked with me. I can't speak for everybody here, but I think that's like a pretty good.
So let me show you this graph. I just have some backups here on this topic. We could talk a lot more about stage fright. But it really never occurred to me until you asked, Nate, but you could be so passionate about a topic that your mind is racing at 1,000,000 miles per hour and it's hard for your mouth to catch up. So you could be overly passionate and that could mess up in translation. But typically just a good healthy dose of anxiety is really good for our performance. So if we don't care, chances are we're going to perform pretty terribly. And then if we're really, really nervous, our performance is going to suffer as a result. Any other questions? Such good questions. My favorite topic to talk about. I'll throw up a review slide here as well.